You're listening to a Pleasure Podcast, a podcast network revolutionizing the conversation around sex and relationships. For more, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Hi, everyone. We hope that you're taking care of yourself during this challenging time.
We decided to do twice weekly online video hangouts that are open to anybody, whether you're a patron or not, every Tuesday and Thursday from 10 a.m. Pacific, that's 1 p.m. Eastern, up until 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, where it's just open. You can come hang out, have some friends while you do some work, or find people to chat with or play games with.
So if you want more information about that, if you want to find out when the next hangout is happening, go to multiamory.com/hangout. Actually leaving a mental space behind can be hard if you keep on thinking about it, which is what our brains just want to do. They just want to, you know? So it can be helpful to make some time at the end of work or at the end of a vacation or after a date to collect your thoughts and write them down. You know, it can be as simple as just opening up the Notes app on your phone and just scrolling a couple things. Takes barely any time at all. I think this is especially helpful if maybe you're coming from one relationship where there was conflict with that partner, you had to tackle some heavy talks, and now you're coming back home to your nesting partner that you live with, or, you know, going on a date with another partner, that it's helpful to, you know, have that space to write out those thoughts so that they're on the page and not bouncing around in your brain anymore.
Welcome to the Multiamory Podcast. I'm Jace.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Dedeker.
We believe in looking to the future of relationships, not maintaining the status quo of the past.
So whether you're monogamous, polyamorous, swinging, casually dating, or if you just do relationships differently, we see you and we're here for you.
Things I know I did, forcing me to form myself to fit.
On this episode of the Multiamory Podcast, we're talking about daily transitions. We've talked about life transitions and big things like that in the past, but today this is about the little transitions that you go through every day, whether that's transitioning from one partner to being with another, to being on a date, to being back home with your kids, to going from work to vacation, or just relaxing in the evening. All these little transitions that are so much a part of our day, but can often be really challenging to do effectively. And so we're going to be covering a variety of things about all of those in this episode today.
Yeah, so we do get a lot of emails and people who reach out to us asking about this particular topic. We did recently get a comment, I believe it was in our Patreon, in our Facebook group, specifically from a listener talking about, you know, transitioning their time from being with one partner who was a newer partner to going back to their partner who was an older partner. And also sounds like they were nesting with this partner as well. And there was things like having to go back to the cooking and the cleaning and helping the kids with schoolwork and stuff like that. And having a hard time, I think, reconciling that abrupt shift in energy and in feeling between these two relationships and between these two households, both alike in dignity.
Nice. Nice throwback there.
I didn't think I'd say the word household, and you have to follow it with that. So. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced that, like for surezies. I think it's kind of inevitable, especially if you're in any kind of non-monogamous or multi-partner relationship, just out of the sheer fact that every single relationship, every single partner has a different history, different baggage, different responsibilities, different commitments, and different levels of emotionality and intimacy. And so, of course, there's always going to be a sense of shifting gears slightly from one person to the other.
Well, and even if you live alone, if you're very solo poly and don't have like a nesting relationship, transitioning from being with people over to not being with people, like transitioning into your maybe everyday like at home life, or, you know, currently right now, many of us are on stay at home lockdown type orders and things like that. Like, what is that like versus being with a partner and being alone? So there's a lot of different transitions to kind of delve into here.
Absolutely. And as the person who commented pointed out, there's really not a lot of resources about this. That there's really not, no one seems to be talking about or writing about that transition specifically from being with one partner to coming back home to being with another, and how that can be sort of jarring. And I've heard a lot of different versions of this, where it's like the example that Dedeker talked about the new partner, it's all very exciting. And then it's kind of coming home to like the daily life with the partner and having to do the dishes and take care of the kids. And I've also heard it, though, where it's I'm out with this partner and we have this one particular kind of sexual energy or some sort of a BDSM dynamic to our relationship. And then when I go with my other partner where maybe we have like the opposite roles from that, or it's just a very different type of relationship. Maybe it's more of a queer platonic relationship, whatever it is, that like switching between headspaces can be challenging. So in researching this, most of the research out there about switching mental states has to do with going from work to not work, or from going from your daily life to vacation. This interesting field of research about why people come back from vacations and the effects, like the good effects of having a vacation, go away incredibly quickly most of the time. There's sort of a whole body.
Don't say.
Yeah. There's a whole body of research about why that is. And so for this episode, I'm actually kind of excited to take that sort of research and those ideas that come up in those articles about different types of transitions and how those can apply not only to something like work or getting into a project or going on vacation, but also switching between being with different partners or even just different people who are close and important in your life.
Yeah. So the first thing to bear in mind is that turns out we're not computers.
What?
Hate to break it to you.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Jess is so sad about this.
I know.
But I listen to all that electronic music to try to become one.
It's true, though, Emily. He'll be in the middle of coding in the middle of the day, and I'll come in, and yeah, he'll be blasting on his headphones electronic music that you don't normally listen
Beep,
to.
boop, boop, boop.
That's not
Right.
normally your scene, but yeah, he's always like, I'm trying to become one with the computer.
Wow, well,
Does it
whatever
help?
works, I guess.
Do you find that
yeah,
it helps,
exactly.
Jace?
Does it?
I do find that it helps. Yeah, that's why I do it.
Really?
I don't do it every day. I mean, the other day I also listened to like a full day of Handel,
Yes.
Renaissance
Love
music
it.
or Renaissance and Baroque music. So I change it up, but often it's like I want really hard, very like kind of electronic music so I can be one with the computer. Yeah.
I would listen to very intense and fast electronic music if I was late to a gig and knew that I had to pull some dangerous maneuvers on the LA freeways.
Oh,
and
yikes.
get there in time.
Yikes.
that would pump me up enough to get my courage to be like, okay, I can do this.
Oh dear, that sounds dangerous.
I
Dang.
pretend I was in Tron or something. Anyway,
Love it.
we're not computers. So we can't just, like a computer, immediately switch between tasks very easily. And we can't switch very easily between vastly different social situations as well. Now, it's something we do all the time. This is a very day-to-day situation where you're going from work to not work to friends to your partner to another partner or whatever. However, if we spend, for instance, your whole drive home from work, or if right now you're working from home, your whole walk to the living room where your family is, still thinking about work, still puzzling over work, then trying to immediately switch to on time, family time, date time, often it can be difficult or sometimes just plain won't work.
Yeah, it's like you're still kind of in work mode and then, your partner or your kids are like, I'm hungry, where's food? And it's like, it's jarring. It's like this, you're trying to talk to me about one thing when I'm totally in a different headspace.
Yeah, I definitely know for me that, especially if I've had a very, very long work day and a very packed work day, it feels like it takes significantly longer for me to get out of that mode. Like when my brain has spent a solid 8 or 9 hours in one particular mode, that it feels like it takes a solid hour. I feel bad sometimes because I feel like I'm just like spacey and not very present and, want to talk to my partner about work stuff that like they can't really help me with necessarily, like I definitely feel like my mind kind of getting stuck in that mode. So as far as tackling mental recalibration, it's really important to make sure that you're able to give yourself some kind of time for the transition. Now, this isn't going to be always available to you in every single situation. Sometimes we got to go back to back and just boom, boom, boom. But if you are able to carve out time for a transition, a mental transition, definitely take it.
I do appreciate being able to like drive somewhere for that mental recalibration sometimes, like the opportunity to get to like be at a workspace and then drive home to your other destination, whether it be home or another partner or somewhere, is kind of nice because it allows for that time and it allows for that like maybe quiet moment to yourself. And unfortunately, not all of us have that opportunity right now. So we have to like have different sorts of boundaries for our time. Maybe if that's just like directly after the workday ends, sitting there quietly for 15 minutes by yourself and sort of like transitioning personally and internally out of that time.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is intentionally transitioning. So specifically in the commute, one thing that came up a lot in different articles that I read was this idea of it's not just enough to be in the car on your way home from work, say. It's that people would say things like, I have a specific landmark. Like there's this one big tree that's 15 minutes before I get to home. And when I see that, that's my cue to, okay, I'm going to stop rethinking about work stuff and trying to solve these problems. And now I'm going to start switching into my being at home brain and like get myself in that headspace. And so I think that same thing, Emily, like you said, is making that time intentional instead of, maybe I'll schedule 15 minutes between things, but then I spend the whole 15 scrolling Facebook.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So this could look like things like starting your wrap up at work earlier if you're able to, or maybe even ending a date slightly earlier than you think that you may need to. I know that's something that's really hard to do when you're an NRE and just like every single little last second feels precious. But, you may consider when you're making transitions between partners of actually giving yourself a little bit of that time to transition. I know that this is something I've been puzzling over for years because in my life, like I spend big chunks of the year living with Jace, alternating with chunks of the year living with my other partner, Alex. And that transition, I mean, I think I'm used to it at this point just because it's happened so many times. But I will say that like it's often this week of this really, really weird emotional space of being really sad that I'm now separated from a partner that I just spent all this time with, combined with being really excited to be reunited with a partner that I haven't physically been with in quite a while. And it's not a bad space to be in, but it's definitely weird. And I've certainly tried to puzzle over like, what do I need to do about that transition? It's not always feasible for me to be like, well, I'm just going to go somewhere else on my own for a week and just deal with it that way. Like, I don't know. That's definitely something that I've also kind of tried to puzzle over is like, what's a way to ritualize that or make that transition feel a little bit more intentional, like you said.
Yeah. And I think that there's an element of communicating to your partner about it or to the people around you, to your family or your friends, and let them know that you need a little transition time. That if you can, though, it's great if you can find a space to do that. Maybe having a whole week to yourself is a bit much scheduling wise. But something else that a lot of people talked about with making the transition from work to home, and I think this is actually a really, really good one if you're actually going out on a date, like you're out of the house spending time with someone, is on your way back to home, especially if you live at home with another partner, is to stop somewhere on the way home. Like stop and get a coffee or something like that, or stop at a park nearby and just take a little walk or do something to kind of give yourself a moment to come down from one thing and prepare for another rather than just rushing from one to the other. So that's something that came up a lot. And I think that if you're stuck at home right now, going for a walk is a nice alternative for that. That's something that Dedeker and I have actually started doing fairly regularly, not quite every day, but is when both of us are done with work, we'll say, should we go for a walk now? Yeah, let's go for a walk. And we'll both just go together. Even sometimes it's really short. It's 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes it's a longer walk, but it just kind of is a signal of, hey, we're getting out of that space. We're moving into a different space. And it often takes me at least the first half of that walk to kind of get out of my work brain.
Yeah. Have I talked about Cuddle Club on this show before?
I don't think so.
Not that I recall.
That's the silly kind of transitional ritual that I have with Alex at the end of the workday. And I mean, especially, when we were in the same house, once lockdown was a thing and we were both working from home, that, Cuddle Club is just sitting on the couch for 5 minutes, cuddling, ideally, hence the name.
Right.
But I found that was a super useful transition. And it's like, not no phones. We're not like watching something on TV or whatever. Like it's literally just kind of like 5 or 10 minutes of just us time, just like talking about the day or whatever. And then, then maybe we'll go for a walk or make dinner or figure out what's going to happen for the evening or go our separate ways or whatever. And yeah, I found that like having that kind of touch point, again, it's like your brain really loves these like repeating symbols and repeating rituals and cyclical nature of things. It was like that touch point of like, okay, I've arrived at Cuddle Club and don't laugh at me.
No, I love it. That's very sweet.
It's a very exclusive club.
Yeah.
It is.
Became just that much easier to know, okay, I can transition into relaxing time now or transition into like whatever's next. That's not work.
See, I use my walk in the morning. It's the first thing that I do in the morning. And to me, it offers like a transition of, okay, I'm up now. I've had some like water to rehydrate my body. And now like I'm going for my 45-minute or hour walk. And then like I can tackle the day after that. So I think that it can be used in whatever like method or way that works best for you in order to transition into the next thing.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about clear divisions between tasks during working when you are like at work or at home. Okay. Getting in the zone, it's like a very great feeling, and it can be really stressful and disorienting to like constantly be interrupted from that flow. Like Jace specifically,
Like, I was going to say,
you with this.
Yes, Jace wrote this line.
Definitely,
so obviously.
because I feel like half of this podcast is just Dedeker or I being like,
Jace,
are you there?
Jace.
What are you
Jace.
doing?
What are you doing, Jace?
Hello.
Jace.
Yeah, because he often, I think, just gets in the zone so much, and it's very difficult to like grab him and like take him on to the next thing.
I mean, it's a great thing. There's so much research out there about how flow and theta waves, not theta waves. Is it theta waves? Theta waves
some
in your
kind of waves.
brain are like really important. And it's really good to be in that flow and in the zone and really good for creativity and productivity and all this stuff like that. Jace is really, really great at that.
Yeah, but I mean, in this, I think we all can be better at this, though, like creating these boundaries or these barriers around like certain blocks of time. It can really do great things for your productivity and for your mood. And all three of us, I think, have a hard time like stepping away from work. Maybe Dedeker is the best at it, but I know like Jace, when Dedeker's not with you, often you'll be like, yeah, I'm working at like 9 p.m. in the evening.
Right.
And, and just like, when does work stop? I don't know. And I'll probably, I'll often work on the weekends, even though maybe I should really delineate between play and work time. So it is important to like have those very strict kind of boundaries around your work and play time, because I think it can be really good for your mood and your overall sense of well-being.
And it's nice to have boundaries. You can also apply this to how you approach your partners as well. That, again, it's really nice to have ritual. So kind of like with the Cuddle Club thing of like, okay, yeah, it's 5 or 10 minutes where we're not on our phones and we're just hanging out, talking, touching each other, having a good time. It's very similar to that, that it could be, okay, we're going to sit down for a meal without our phones, and maybe my other partner knows that for this period of time, I'm not going to be super responsive via text or things like that, that having boundaries and really protecting your time and protecting the time that you have with your partners can really, really help to kind of maintain these divisions so things don't feel quite so muddled or disorienting.
Yeah, and especially with things like news, too. Like, it's good to get your phone away from you at times just because there's so much between, like, just all the doom and gloom on Facebook and Twitter and all that, and then all the doom and gloom and the news. Like, it's really good to just distance yourself from that for a time, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, and just kind of, like, maybe up that from there, however long you can stand. But especially if you can truly, like, disconnect from your phone and then be able to sit there and be present with your partner. It's a lovely, freeing thing.
Yeah. So this is something that I think for a lot of people, the idea of not being accessible on their phone is a stressful thought. That it's maybe that sounds like it'd be nice, but I need to be available for my kids or for my partners or for my family or, whatever it is. And so if that's how you feel, something that can be helpful is to just start with a small little block. Say it's at the start of your workday or it's after your workday is over, of having just like 30 minutes of time where I'm not going to respond to anything on my phone. I'm not going to check my email. I'm not going to read the news. I'm not going to be on social media, right? That I'm not going to do those things. I could still be on my computer playing a Sudoku game if that's something that's fun for you. You know, you could be doing something on technology, but just not getting pulled into those things that sort of suck you out of time for yourself and instead put you into time for everybody else. And just taking that little bit and then see if you can grow from there can be a really kind of amazing transformative thing. And it might be addictive enough that you're say, I'm going to make more time like that during my day.
I really like this one. Change your clothes between your work and your home time. Like if you're going on a date, then generally you might want to be picking out your perfect outfit or whatever. But I do love this idea of, you know, you have your work clothes. Dedeker right now, I'll paint a word picture. She has on a very nice, lovely button-up shirt. But I'm assuming when you're doing your, you know, fun, let's hang out and do Cuddle Club and eat dinner or whatever, you're probably not going to have that on. I mean,
as soon as we're done recording, I'm ripping this thing off.
Yeah, there you go.
Uncomfortable.
Exactly. And that's really nice.
It's like the taking the bra off transition at the end of the day.
I can't wait.
It's just so nice.
It's gotta come off. I'm done now.
I will say though, I have been resistant to this one for a long time until quite recently when I started kind of forcing myself to do it more so, because often I don't know, to be totally honest, since I'm so used to working from home, like I kind of dress for comfort generally, to look good but be comfortable, and so often I'm just like, I can wear this the whole day, or I'm not that sweaty, I don't need to change my clothes, but still making myself do it anyway is really nice. It's just real nice.
Yeah.
I've also found that it's nice, even if it's not a big change. It's not like I'm dressing up all the time when I work. Like I'm wearing a t-shirt right now, but with slacks on the bottom half, but just wearing a t-shirt, and so my change in the evening might just be to put on shorts or to change my shoes or put on different slippers or, you know, something to just make it feel different, that there's sort of a clear, I'm not the work me now. And so for me, it's putting on slacks, it's putting on pants. It's like I'm in work mode. And then when I change into shorts or sweatpants or something, that's home mode.
No, it's funny, Emily, you mentioned the sprucing up for a date, because that's one that I think feels very natural to people that, I'm going on a date, especially if it's someone new. Of course, I'm going to try to dress my best and make sure I look pretty and smell good and I'm groomed the way that I want to be groomed. And so we're used to that transition. And I think we don't realize how much that transition in itself can transform you. And we tend to lose that either when coming back from that space, like coming back from the date, or when we're preparing for date time with like a long established partner. You know, like that's one of the things that very quickly gets lost, is that date time or quality time becomes, let's just schlub on the couch. And schlubbing on the couch is fantastic, and I love it so much, and it's very needed sometimes. But there is also something of, even if we're going to schlub on the couch, if tonight's an intentional date night, we can still change our clothes potentially. And again, it doesn't even have to be super fancy necessarily, but like there's something about that. You know, I know that I work with a lot of people where their partner starts dating someone new and they have a really hard time watching their partner suddenly put in all this effort, shaving and showering and dressing up and putting on the makeup, you know, for those like, well, I don't get that anymore, you know, and sometimes kind of roping that back into your relationship is really nice as well, especially to help get you in the mode of like, this is date time, and it's not necessarily time where we're co-parenting or adulting or figuring out the bills or whatever. It's truly date time.
Yeah, I have been here in this house with my partner for like the last 4 months, and that's basically been it. Haven't really seen many other people except for when I'm at work. But every Saturday is our day together, so I'm really trying to like put in a little bit of extra effort and put on some makeup and maybe put on a dress. Wow, I have those. I should use them, even though I'm not going anywhere. But it's been really nice, like just in that transition and, you know, putting in a little extra effort so that he also knows that I appreciate him and want to like look nice for both of us, for me and for him. So it's a nice thing to be able to do for yourself and for your partner.
Yeah, that's a nice way to look at it, too, if it is something you're doing to also get yourself in the mood. I like that.
Because I don't, sometimes I get tired of looking at myself with like no makeup on, just like in sweatpants. I'm like, good Lord, put in a little effort here, person.
This reminds me of, so thinking about the original person's comment about making the transition between partners, it reminds me of a book. Gosh, it was this series of books that were kind of hot in the early 2000s. It was a series of disaster preparedness handbooks that were like a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but they were actually quite realistic of like, this is how you fly a plane. This is how you wrestle an alligator. This is how you birth a baby.
I remember those,
Yeah, and they came out with a couple of different versions, and one of them was for social situations as well. And I remember, this is really terrible, but they had one that was about like how to successfully pull off an affair, essentially.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. And even
can
in the
you
book,
just switch the language a little bit and be like, how to successfully pull off a polyamorous relationship?
Well,
no. Okay.
if you want it to be a very secretive and possibly hurtful polyamorous relationship,
I
yes,
see.
there's those instructions. And they were even like, yeah, you shouldn't do this, but should you want to, here's some things to try.
Gosh.
But one of the things was, keep a change of clothes in your vehicle and change clothes in between partners. And I guess their intention was less of like giving yourself a mental transition and more of a preventing you from getting caught, I guess, the old lipstick on the collar situation.
Right.
But I could see this actually being very effective if you're driving back and forth between two partners and having a hard time kind of mentally transitioning between those relationships, that could be something as well, to kind of just switch clothes and just see how that feels.
What's this Marie Kondo thing that you wrote?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but I remember in Marie Kondo's show, she had this really funny moment where she's talking about like, I wish I could repeat her Japanese in her perfect Japanese. No, I'm not going to embarrass myself in that way. But, she's like, yeah, like if you're going through the process of throwing out your stuff and you get stuck or blocked or you just get frustrated or whatever, then change the air. It's like, kuki o kaite. That's what she would have said. Yeah. Kuki o kaite.
I'm going to spray this lavender spray.
Yes, exactly.
Right now.
So it was like things like spraying a room spray or lighting some incense or lighting a candle or opening a window or something like that. And I actually really took that to heart. For me, when I'm working, if I come up against a task or if I'm writing something and I get sick of it, I try to kuki o kaite, change the air, by doing those things. But that's also something to consider, I think, when switching between work and home or from your home office space, whatever that is, to going into home office space. Or if you don't have an office and it's just like, I just work in my living room, that's a good way of being able to transition that space as well. Not only changing your clothes, but also like, okay, then I'm going to light this incense or light this candle. That's going to be the cue to me that I'm no longer in work mode. I'm in chill mode.
Yeah.
Josh has Palo Santo wood that he just like smudges all over the house. Dude, it's from Argentina. You just light it and then it has like a very, very strong scent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the last thing I want to say about the clothes actually is that I've found this one to also be really helpful for getting in the mood to do chores. That if workout. Or workout. Yes, that's another good one. And often for me, they're the same. If I can kind of like put on workout clothes to do chores and be like, all right, I'm going to do it. If I can get myself in that mental headspace, I enjoy myself a lot more than being like, ugh, here I am. And like, ugh, now I'm sweaty in my work clothes. And, it's that same thing of having a change of mindset for it. Okay. So now we are finishing with some kind of mental headspace, whether that's work or that's being on a date with one partner or whatever it is. When you leave that mental space, try to actually leave it. And we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, and it's easier said than done, but it's that idea of, can you leave work at work? Or it comes up in articles for athletes of how do you get into the zone, which is kind of how do you leave everything else behind, right? How do you let go of whatever drama's going on in your relationship or whatever so that you can focus on the task at hand? Basically, when you're leaving any one mental space for another, there's things you can do to try to kind of clean up and unload that previous task from your brain's RAM. Again,
boy.
we
I'm
are
glad that
computers after all. Yeah.
The computer is speaking.
He
Okay.
really wishes he was a computer.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So, of course, actually leaving a mental space behind can be hard if you keep on thinking about it, which is what our brains just want to do. They just want to, you know? So it can be helpful to make some time at the end of work or at the end of a vacation or after a date to collect your thoughts and write them down. You know, it can be as simple as just opening up the notes app on your phone and just scrolling a couple things. Takes barely any time at all. I think this is especially helpful if maybe you're coming from one relationship where there was conflict with that partner. You had to tackle some heavy talks, and now you're coming back home to your nesting partner that you live with, or, you know, going on a date with another partner, that it's helpful to, you know, have that space to write out those thoughts, that they're on the page and not bouncing around in your brain anymore. And by writing them down, you essentially give your brain permission to not be holding on to them anymore. And it's kind of like hitting save, doing a little Control S or a little Apple S, or going to a little save point in your game.
Oh, I didn't realize I could do that. Thank you for the hotkey.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
Emily is not a computer.
No.
No, I always am like, Jace, how do I do this? And then Jace sometimes is like, Dedeker, you know Apple's better than I do. How does she do this? I'm very grateful for both of you.
Maybe together, the three of us barely make a computer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure. I'll be the aesthetic side.
Yeah, you're the Apple Sheen.
Yeah. Okay, that's it though. Definitely.
Wow. Yeah, and I love this. Also, I love this idea for dates. And I actually, so this is something that I have not thought to try yet, because in putting this episode together, I was like, this is a really cool idea. But doing that same sort of thing, like you might do at the end of work, of saying, okay, this is what I worked on today. Here's what I still need to do tomorrow, and writing it down and like leaving it on your desk so that tomorrow when you come in, you have it there, so you don't have to keep thinking, oh no, I got to make sure I don't forget that. Got to make sure I don't forget that while you're at home. That on a date, on your way back from it, or right after the date, take a moment to yourself to just write down, this is what we did. This is what was great. I felt so amazing. This thing gave me a little bit of pause. I'm a little curious what's going on here. Maybe something to look into or like ask about another time. To kind of have both of that, of this just reminiscing about how great it was, but also, this is something I might want to ask about. I think could actually be really helpful for those early phases of a relationship where you're kind of so high on brain chemicals when you're with them that it's like, oh, right, I had all these things I wanted to ask, or I wanted to check on something that I wasn't sure if I understood them correctly when they told me about their relationship with their family, or, you know, whatever it is, that you have that. So then you have sort of a record of it instead of just it flips out of your brain. Or that you wake up in the middle of the night going, right, I need to ask them about that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I in terms of writing things down, I'm just going to say, from like a to-do list task standpoint, this is a really important thing to do too. Because so often I'm like on a walk, or I'm like working out, or I'm doing dishes, and I'm like, shit, I need to do this, and this today.
Yeah.
And just being able to like take a moment, take a transition, and write something down, and then go back into the thing if you need it, is very important, and something that I definitely could be better on.
Yeah.
So you can use that in very many ways.
So now that you've left behind the mental space you were in before, it's time to transition into the next one. But first, we're going to transition into talking about how to support this show and keep this around for everyone for free.
So our beloved AdamandEve.com is this week's sponsor. And we really love them just simply because they have been with us since the beginning of Multiamory. And that's awesome. We love like brand relationships. No, I'm kidding. But we just love them. They're awesome. And if you are in a relationship, you might be having sex. And so you might need some sexy things. And because of that, why don't you go to Adam and Eve and grab some sexy things?
I like how you're walking people through the whole like logical process of...
Exactly. No, just in case, you know what? I'm going to spell it all out for you. So you might want to get some sexy clothing, some like lingerie, get a little sexy candle, sexy toy, and maybe some sexy porn. You can get all of these things, even condoms, at adamandeve.com. So if you were looking for something that maybe is a little expensive, a little out of your price range, you can use our promo code MULTI, M-U-L-T-I, at checkout. You can actually use it as many times as you want. Get a bunch of really expensive things and knock 50% right off of that. You'll also get a free gift and free shipping when you use our promo code. So definitely go and do that. Go to adamandeve.com, use Multi, and then it'll also give us a nice little kickback, and we will love you even more than we already do. And Adam and Eve, for that matter.
Since the beginning of this show, it's been really important to us to make these resources and this information available to as many people as possible. And doing that through a free podcast has been amazing in helping us reach more people to let them know that they are represented, that there are people who understand you and who are working on relationship advice and tools for you, and not just if you fit into this one particular mold that's in the movies and the TV shows. And over the last 5 years, we've been able to grow that reach to so many more people. It's been really amazing. And that's been almost entirely possible just because of people supporting us at patreon.com/multiamory.
Something that's been really beautiful to see is that also in our Patreon community, some of our listeners are able to, for the first time ever, access a supportive community and a support network. We have a lot of listeners who are in remote areas who don't necessarily have access to a supportive community, and our Patreon community has been able to give that to a lot of people, which is really wonderful to see. And so we really appreciate the people who are in our community who choose to support the show, and we want to give back to the people who are going out of their way to help us keep making this show.
So some of the cool things that we offer as a thank you include private Facebook and Discord communities just for our Patreon listeners, having early releases on episodes, getting bonus episodes, and also private video discussion groups. We love getting to give back to our community in that way. So if you do want to join this amazing community of people who help make this show possible, go to patreon.com/multiamory today and become a patron of ours. We'd really appreciate it. So once you want to get back into a mental space, we should actually get into it. So we just talked about leaving a mental space and actually leaving it. But then if you want to transition back into a space or go to a new mental space, then yeah, we're going to talk about some ways to actually insert yourself into that space. So instead of saving our progress, we're kind of loading it back in. We've got our I wasn't even going to say CD-ROM drive. I had the image of a floppy disk in my head, and loading it
really
in.
Old school.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
You talked about the fact that there is quite a lot of information about transitioning away from work. Mm-hmm. There's less information out there, about the opposite, about preparing yourself for work or for when you're coming back to the task that you need to do that day, or things like that, or thing that you need to focus on that day.
Yeah, the resources about getting into a task, I found, tend to show up most in two specific arenas, at least in my searching. One is for athletes, about getting in the zone, of how to get into that mental headspace. And then the other is for creatives. It's how do you get into the creative zone to do your writing? Or how do you get into the zone to do your computer programming? Or how do you get in the zone to do your painting? That I find those were sort of the two arenas, but I actually think it applies in a lot of other ways as well. But just people don't tend to think about getting into the flow when it's vacuuming or something like that.
Oh, boy.
Well, I do know some kinky people who need some transition time when they're going to do a scene, or when they're getting into dom mode or their sub persona or whatever it is. Some people I know can just switch into it super easy and it's super great, but I know other people really appreciate having that time, having that space, or having something intentional that they do that helps them get there as well.
Yeah, so if you did write something down when you were exiting a situation, then this would be a good time to take a look at what you wrote down from that last interaction or that, last space that you were in, and kind of refresh yourself, have a little refresher. So if you check your journal before a date or read a to-do list before starting work, just like a mental inventory of what you're going to do. And this I found to be very interesting, associating what you wrote down with a goal. So asking yourself the question of like, what do I want from this interaction? What do I want from this day? What do I want from, I don't know, my time with my kids? Like, do I want a closer relationship with them? Do I want a cleaner space? And that's why I'm about to do the dishes again after this meal that I cooked. Or, I don't know. Do you want to, improve your podcast? And so I'm going to sit down and do this work for it. Something along those lines. And I really like that idea because it doesn't just like add to the monotony of, oh, I'm trudging through this day yet again, or I'm trudging through this moment in time, but I have like a goal associated with it. And maybe it adds a little bit more lightness to it or excitement to it.
Yeah. And it's good, if you want to be goal oriented about it, it's good to make them small and doable, even better if it's small and doable within the time frame that you're at work or at the task that you're wanting to focus on or on the date or whatever, as opposed to something lofty and amorphous like I want to get a promotion or I want to have a perfectly clean house or things like that. I know that something that I would do sometimes when coming to work is I would more ask myself, what is it that I want to focus on today? So that then it could be something more like, okay, I want to focus on, keeping my cool even when someone has said something that's very triggery to me, for instance, or I want to focus on, really just focusing on one task at a time and not trying to multitask, things like that of stuff that I can try on that feels doable.
Yeah, I found for myself that having a focus can be really good, but also having a goal that's sort of more of it's almost more about what I want to appreciate about the work I'm doing or what would make this work something that I could be proud of, if even in this very small way of like, I'm proud of how the floors are vacuumed or something like that. But it's focusing on finding some goal like that. It's like, okay, today, my goal is going to be that I want to do these dishes and be really mindful about how I'm doing them. Or I'm going to do these dishes and I'm going to experiment with like a different way of holding the dishes to see if it's more ergonomic for my hands, right? It could kind of be whatever. It can be sort of esoteric or it could be just very concrete, but kind of like Dedeker's focusing. It helps, I think, especially with work for me. It really helps me to think, I'm just going to focus today on not, I'm going to try to get my stuff done. But my real goal for myself is I want to make the code that I'm writing today really organized. Or like, I want to make this really clear and easy for me to come back to in a year and still understand what I was doing. Or something like that. Something that's a little bit bigger of an idea, but it's something that I can do in every moment rather than it's like, oh, it's completed, check, done.
Yeah. And it's really natural for the mind to wander or for distractions to just arise. And that's totally okay. I think many of us have the experience of spending time with a partner, but maybe your mind keeps going back to a really stressful interaction you had with somebody that day, or your mind keeps going back to work, or you're hanging out with a partner, but your kids keep running in to ask for things. It's natural. We're not going to be perfect at this. And so that's why it's really good to... I don't want to say the word recommit because that sounds so Christian. So I don't want to say that, but again, just kind of bringing yourself back to the what and the why of the mode that you're in right now, whether that's I'm in partner mode or date mode or work mode or things like that. And it can be a little bit easier to get back into it. It can be helpful to recruit help in this as well. If it feels appropriate for your relationship, you can be honest. You're like, oof, okay, sorry. I'm a little distracted right now. My mind keeps going back to this thing. And you can evaluate, is it, I would love your listening while I talk through this, to help me get my thoughts in order? Or is it, I would just love your help in kind of grounding me and keeping me here and let's talk about something else or something like that.
I think that's an interesting one and a nuanced one when it comes to going on dates and coming back from a date to another partner, is that there's some negotiation there with maybe it's, hey, can I come back from this date and talk to you about how I feel for 10 minutes? But for some people that might be, oof, that's awful. That's kind of exactly what we want to avoid because my partner feels hurt that I'm so focused on this other relationship and not on them when I come back. So maybe that's the opportunity to take 15 minutes to call your best friend and gush about it so you can kind of get it out, or it's journaling, or it's something to let that go. But yeah, finding someone else to help you with that is a really cool way of doing that.
All right.
So this next one is the tough one. So if we go back to the original example of I went out on this date and then I kind of dread coming back home to having to do chores and, you know, whatever, this thing, that we've talked about some techniques for changing your mindset and things like that. But if that dread is consistently coming up with anything, whether that's work or your home life or a particular partner or something, very likely that's a sign. That is your brain trying to tell you, hey, something is bad here. Something is wrong here. And that doesn't necessarily mean that person's bad or that job is bad or that your home or your family is bad. That's not what I'm saying. But more, this could be a sign that you really need to examine this and try to change something. So first question to ask yourself, if you find that repeatedly coming up, is there something about this space that I could change? My workspace, my home life, whatever. Is there something I could just literally change? Kind of like changing the air, like Dedeker said. You know, maybe it's redecorating, maybe it's spring cleaning, maybe it's getting rid of some things that bring up negative memories or have negative associations or something like that. Next question is there something that you're not communicating to the people around you in this environment that you should be? Is there something that you're holding on to that's just kind of festering inside of you and you're not being honest about and upfront about and clear about? And then is there a clearer or more interesting goal or purpose that you could be coming up with for why you're doing this at all? Kind of like we talked about with the goals, but is there something that's more invigorating for you or a different way to think about this interaction?
Now, if you've done all of these things and if you've tried various tactics to change your environment, like change maybe your thinking, and it's still not really working, it may be time to ask yourself, is something really wrong here? So, yeah, like sometimes a small change to an environment or a change in thinking, it can make a huge difference, but then other times there is something more serious underneath that dread, and that is really something to examine. So in places like a relationship or places like your workspace, it could be anything from maybe needing to have a very serious talk and beginning kind of a restructuring process. Do you need to move jobs? Do you need to, talk to your boss about something very difficult? Or do you need to find a way out of the relationship that you're in, for example? Things like that. And this can be, I think, really challenging because our brains, and I think just ourselves as people, do want to kind of hold on. And we've talked about that in various episodes in the past. We like to, we don't want to change our space so much that it completely makes a huge upheaval to our lives. And yet there are moments in time where maybe that is just the thing that we need. And so it's important to examine that.
Yeah. And lastly, we're going to talk about something that's really important for this for, if you're constantly going back and forth between work and home, if you have a very packed schedule or a packed schedule of partners, potentially, how important it is to find a way to have time for yourself. It's so easy to get caught up in moving from one obligation to another. And it even includes things like leisure time that we normally think of as leisure time, like having to be on for a date or spending time with family at home where it's not just that I'm a partner, but I also have to be a parent, things like that. And of course, everyone has different needs for the amount of time that they need by themselves. And different people have different access as well to how easy it is for them to carve out time. Having something like a whole evening or an entire daytime once a week that is just yours and isn't available for others to schedule is great. That's not realistic for some people. For other people, they're able to do it. For some people, even if they live at home with a partner or with their family, they can still carve out like, okay, well, this particular chunk of 2 hours on this particular evening is just my time where I'm going to go in my room and just have quiet time, and we can kind of onboard people in the family with being okay with that. Again, it's going to really depend on what you need and the people around you as well.
Dedeker, what's that reference that you always make to Mrs. So-and-so's special time?
Miss Lippy's special time.
For some reason, I was just thinking about that.
From
so-and-so special time.
From Billy Madison, yes.
Right.
Billy Madison,
where he
Adam
comes
Sandler film.
in during recess and the teacher's doing ecstatic dance or something.
Long story short is that Adam
God.
Sandler as an adult has to go back to grade school. Don't worry about it. Just assume it's hilarious in the ways that Adam Sandler can be hilarious, I guess. He's at grade school. The kindergarten teacher, he comes back in during recess, comes back into the classroom and catches her dancing around the room with like a macaroni necklace, doing like this ecstatic dance. And she's like really caught off guard and surprised. She's like, oh my goodness, you need to be outside with the other boys and girls playing dodgeball. And she has to explain to him like, so Billy, like recess time is special time for you kids, but it's also Miss Lippy's special time. And
So that
is she going and like drinking or what's happening?
No, just ecstatic dancing. That's how I feel when I go.
It just needs to freaking reset because kids are difficult. I think that makes a lot of sense.
That's how I feel when I go to an ecstatic dance class. Like, I don't want to invite anyone that I know because it's Miss Lippy's special time.
Yeah, no, totally. Although I would like to see that, Dedeker, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, I mean, that's a great example.
It's Miss Lippy's special time, Emily. You can't see it.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, that's a great idea. Of a way in which you can make time for yourself. Mm-hmm. So yeah, having things like, here's a list. Having things like unstructured time. So doing, I don't know, you could have like an hour or two or a day of just unstructured time, doing whatever you fancy in the moment.
Unstructured time is something I find I often really crave if I feel like every moment of my day is scheduled with stuff.
And structured, yeah.
Right. That even if I'll end up doing a lot of the same things that I would on a scheduled day, like I'm still going to work on this project a little bit, or I'm still going to do some chores, but having it be unstructured for me is something I find that if I'm not getting enough of that time where I can kind of evaluate what I want to be doing at any given moment or what I want to be working on, I like need it. And when I get it, I feel a lot better.
There you go. You could have reading time or watching your own shows. That's kind of nice to be able to, have maybe a show that just you watch that your partner doesn't enjoy with you necessarily, but you are just enjoying it on your own and get a time to watch that. Writing or journaling. That's a fun one. Yeah, my personal favorite. Yeah, walking, exercising, doing something physical. I used to take walks with my partner, and sometimes we still do. But I really, really crave like my own personal, like 45 minutes to an hour to do that by myself, get caught up on my podcasts. I really need it. And I've been doing it every day for a long time. So it's great. Things like organizing your environment, if that brings you joy. I'm not great about that personally, but I know the two of you are. You're fantastic at it.
This is a funny one where we've had some off days where, we're trying to relax. It's like, what should we do? Oh, maybe we should go start to organize some things in this room or reorganize the linen closet or something where it's like, this doesn't seem like it would be relaxing and enjoyable, but somehow it is sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and masturbating, great one.
Hell yeah.
Yes, always. And then there are also things to avoid during this time. Browsing social media. I know that's a tough one. I'm definitely do that a lot. But if you can, again, as we said earlier, even if it's just like, okay, take 30 minutes where you really like put down the phone, or an hour where you put down the phone and like devote it to something else. Something maybe not necessarily productive, but not doing that. Right. And probably your cortisol will go down and you'll be a happier person in general.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This also isn't necessarily the time to like catch up on your email or, as we said before, reading the news or doing other stressful things like that, because it is challenging right now We all are in it together, and it's a good opportunity to maybe like set that down for a minute and enjoy other things in your life that do not involve looking at all the doom and gloom out there.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of thing, at least what I've noticed for myself, that if I'm ever feeling like, oh, I don't have time to make time for myself today or this week or whatever, that every time you reach for your phone to just kind of scroll or just kind of peruse, like that's an opportunity that could be actually like intentional, a little bit of self-time, you know? So for me, for instance, like in between clients or whatever, that it's a very different mood if I just like grab my phone and I'm just scrolling in the 5 or 10 minutes I have between clients versus if I'm like, okay, I'm going to read actually for this 5 or 10 minutes, or I'm going to meditate, or I mean, I don't really masturbate on work days, but I guess you could if you really wanted to.
Like,
I don't know.
What?
Or I'm going to go take a walk. I'm going to move along from the masturbation, you know, or I'm going to write something really quick. That it's, you know, that's a good little like opportunity to just squeeze in some of that intentionality.
Yeah. I like that a lot, of just having that moment. It reminds me of when I was in high school, my voice teacher was talking to me about reading and the importance of reading for pleasure. And I said something like, yeah, I just feel like I don't have time lately. And he said, I've learned that anytime you don't feel like you have time to read is the most when you need to make time to read. And that's really stuck with me, of that. Those times when you feel like there's no possible way that I could make any time for myself is when you most need to find a way to make some time for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this time with yourself, this could be spent with someone else, but just be sure that that feels restorative to you. And with this restorative alone time, this could also be time you spend with someone else doing something fun, but just kind of check in with yourself and make sure that that actually feels restorative to you, or maybe a balance of that. Sometimes that time could be spent doing a fun activity with your partner, but maybe sometimes it's also time just for yourself. Kind of find your balance, try it out and see how that goes for you. So we're going to go on in our bonus to talk a little bit about some research that we've come across in the past about rituals specifically for getting into a work mindset, and then also how that might apply to your relationships. Going to kind of see what we can come up with there in the bonus. So if you want to check that out, you can become a patron. And we would also love to hear from you about, do you have some cool transition rituals? Is there anything that came up in this episode where you realize, oh my gosh, I need to start making transitions between things better? The best place that you can share your thoughts with other listeners is on this episode's discussion thread in our private Facebook group or Discord chat. You can get access to these groups and join our exclusive community by going to patreon.com/multiamory. In addition, you can share with us publicly on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You can email us at info@multiamory.com. Multiamory is created and produced by Emily Matlack, Dedeker Winston, and me, Jace Lindgren. Our episodes are edited by Mauricio Balvanera. Our social media wizard is Will McMillan. Our production assistants are Rachel Shenowork and Carson Collins. Our theme song is Forms I Know I Did by Josh and Anand from the Fractal Cave EP. The full transcript is available on this episode's page on multiamory.com.